Hi, it's Laura at Aquamarine18. Thanks for stopping by my channel today. This video is going to be a end of year wrap up for 2020 of my reading for the year. I'm putting this video in my depth year playlist because I did have a reading goal at the start of the year related to my depth year that is relevant to this video. So I thought I would start with just a very brief recap of that and then some general kind of rambly thoughts about my reading this year, I suppose, and then a look at the books that I'll be starting to read in 2021. So I started off 2020 with a depth year goal that I called the Book Stack of Shame, and the Book Stack of Shame was 10 books that I owned and that I had owned for some time, but I had not yet read, that I had bought with the intention of reading and hadn't read yet. And so I set the goal to read those books before I bought any more books. I kind of failed at that goal in that I only read 8 out of 10 of them. One of them that I didn't read completely was the Lenormand Oracle Handbook by Kathleen Matthews. This turned out to be less of a linear read than I expected. The other one that I didn't read in my Book Stack of Shame was The Elements of Magic, Reclaiming Earth, Air, Fire, Water, Spirit, edited by Jane Meredith and Gide Parma. And I didn't read this one because I found out that this is kind of based on a course in reclaiming tradition witchcraft, and the prerequisite reading for that is The Spiral Dance by Starhawk. So I had put this aside to read The Spiral Dance first, which I did read. So those are the 2 books from the Book Stack of Shame that I didn't finish. But the Book Stack of Shame was my favorite depth year goal that I set for 2020 by far, and it's the one that I'm the happiest that I did set, even though I only technically 80% completed it. I've talked a little bit about this previously, but I feel like it really has kickstarted my year in a good way. And I have rediscovered my joy of reading that I had kind of lost amidst years and years and years of grad school and intensive reading. For that, leaving me with little energy or desire to read for my own enjoyment, in my spare time. So I've read more this year than probably the last 2 or 3 years combined in terms of like numbers of words or numbers of pages, read strictly for enjoyment, not for work. So I'm really grateful to the Book Stack of Shame for kickstarting that. At the start of the year, I had set a goal on my Goodreads of 36 books for the year, figuring like 3 books a month. That's a good pace. 36 books, I would be happy with that. Goodreads now tells me I'm at 98, and I'm in the middle of 2 books now, so I may end up actually at 100 books for the end of 2020. I've decided to make the 100 books my Goodreads goal for 2021, even though it's like not at all about numbers to me. It's about, the experience of reading and the enjoyment of reading and learning and all of the the wonders that books bring. But I'm really happy to have read so many excellent books this year, so I wanted to have this rambly share about that. I'm filming this on December 28th, so there's a chance that I may actually finish a couple of books between now and January 1st. But as of now, I'm going to put in the description box below, in case anyone is interested, a list of every book that I have read for the year 2020, all of them. I haven't put in things like articles and so on. I mean, I read newspapers and journals and things like this for the news and for work, and I haven't put those in, but this is just reading for myself that I've done this year. And I've sorted the books into broad categories. A lot of the books could be in any number of categories, but I've tried to sort them in a way that makes sense to me. So if you see any books on my list down there that you've read this year as well, or have read and enjoyed before, let me know. I love chatting about books. But I thought today would be a good day to film, since last night I actually finished my novel that I was reading. So I just finished reading what will be my last novel of 2020. And that novel was Moon of the Crested Snow by Wabgishig Rice. And it was excellent. The caption there says, chilling in the best way possible. It was certainly a chilling, atmospheric, tense read that I'm glad to see that I just learned today is going to be getting a sequel. And this is a book about a remote northern Anishinaabe community that experiences a blackout. Their power goes out and their communication go out as well. So the book follows the reactions of the community and the individuals in the community to this disaster as the winter is setting in. It's very, very cold. So this was really excellent. It was a very affecting book. Reading this right now for all kinds of reasons, but I'm really looking forward to the sequel. So that's Moon of the Crested Snow by Wabgishig Rice, my last read. I will mention right now my current reads, which I plan to finish before the year is up. One of them is a novella called How to Lose the Time War by Amal El-Motar and Max Gladstone. How to Lose the Time War is about a time war. So agents who jump around in the timeline, time traveling, changing events to try to favor a better future for their side in this temporal conflict. And it's written in the style of letters back and forth. And I just started it. I'm like 8% in, but I'm really enjoying it so far. The other book I'm reading currently, but I haven't quite finished, is My Grandmother's Hands, Racialized Trauma and the Pathway to Mending Our Hearts and Bodies by Resmaa Menakem. And I first learned about this book, or had this book brought to my attention some months ago when on Queen Aset's channel, Oya's Girl, there was the big summit to talk about racism and anti-racism and representation in tarot and in the tarot community. And this was one of the books recommended as homework reading. So I've been working on this book since then. I did read Hood Feminism as well, the other book that was mentioned. And I'm most of the way through this book. But there are, for those who have not yet picked this book up, there are quite a lot of exercises, breathing exercises and reflections and things like this. So I'm taking the book quite slowly. But I'll be finishing that one soon as well. So this year for reading, for me, it turned out, I think, that reading became the thing that I went in depth with in terms of a depth year that I didn't really expect. When the year started out, I fully expected to be able to get through the book Stack of Shame, for sure. But I never imagined that it would give me reading back in the way that it did. So if I've gone, if I've gone deep with anything in this depth year, it would be reading, broadly speaking. It's been, spent hours of my time, and I've learned so much and read so much, as the list below shows. And I feel like my to read list has grown, to triple the length it was before. And I think that that's a great thing too. I wanted to mention that one of the things related to reading that I've really enjoyed this year has been book clubs and reading groups, particularly being at home so much and, feeling quite isolated, as I'm sure, many of us have. Having online book discussion has been really, really amazing. So I wanted to shout out 3 book clubs, which I will put the information for these all in the description box below in case you are interested. I read many books this past year with the Blossom Book Club hosted by Katie Flowers, who I'm sure everyone will know Katie Flowers. And in the Blossom Book Club, which is associated with Katie's Patreon, we have a Discord server and books are voted on. And then, it's 1 book per month and we discuss the books there. The book club is on a brief hiatus for January at least, but I've really enjoyed it this past year. I've read a ton of books with Blossom Book Club, not all of them, most of us kind of would dip in and out depending if the book that one was one that we were interested in. But we read The Yield by Tara June Winch, which ended up being one of my favorite novels that I read this year. We got to read Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, which was an incredible read as well. So some of my favorite books there, and discussing it with so many wonderful folks really enriched that experience. I also want to shout out to and thank Kelly Bear of Kelly Bear Channel and Becca of Becca Talks and Tarot for co-hosting the Literary Witches project this year. They've put in so much work. So every month a card would be chosen from the Literary Witches Oracle, an accompanying book, which includes all female authors from around the world and throughout history. And 1 card would be picked, and then 1 text by that author would be picked. Kelly would make a fantastic, well-researched biographical introductory video about that author, and we would read the book for the month, and then there would be a live chat with Kelly and Becca at the end of the month. And I read 10 out of 12 of the books with Literary Witches. The only 2 that I missed were Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, which I'd actually read a couple of times before, so I made the choice to not do that again. And the very last book, actually, the autobiography of Alice B. Toklas by Gertrude Stein. And I just was swamped in December with grading. I graded 150 term papers, so, I didn't do as much reading this past month. But other than that, 10 books, by 10 female authors, many of which I wouldn't have likely read without the group, some of which I probably would never have heard of if it wasn't for the Literary Witches Oracle. We read Mules and Men by Zora Neale Hurston. We read Beloved by Toni Morrison. We read Half a Lifelong Romance by Eileen Chang. We read Kindred by Octavia Butler, which I'd read before but read again because Octavia Butler is one of my favorite authors of all time. You'll see from my list in the description box, we read a number of books of poetry. Poetry is not my thing, but I stuck with them, and I'm glad that I did, even though poetry is not my thing. So the book groups were really good for expanding my genre selection. My list is pretty, my fiction list is pretty adult science fiction and fantasy exclusive, like almost exclusively that. So having other authors chosen that I wouldn't have necessarily picked myself was really great. Getting to expand my horizons in that way and finding new authors that I would like to read more of for sure. So I will link to a video related to the Literary Witches book club on Kelly Bear's channel anyway. The project is now over, but there will be a retrospective discussion of our favorite reads that Kelly and Becca are going to be hosting in early January. So if you're interested, check that one out. And finally, the Short Story Club, and I'll link the Short Story Club as well. Short Story Club is a fantastic project through which you can sign up to receive a short story and then go to a Zoom meeting with the author of the short story there, and there's a Q&A. It's really just all Q&A of readers getting a chance to ask the authors questions and it is very much science fiction and fantasy oriented group, and it's a pay what you can, but the tickets, when you get a ticket to go to the Zoom with the author, it's always for a really good cause as well. So I've been happy to support the Short Story Club project, and I hope that it continues on into the future. And I got to go to Short Story Club. I got to go to sessions with Martha Wells, with Tochi Onyebuchi, with Charlie Jane Anders, and Mary Robinette Kowal, and they were all fantastic, and I'm so appreciative for that space. They were all wonderful, and I'm really looking forward to more. I wish I would have found Short Story Club earlier, because some of the earlier authors that they hosted I would have loved to get to go to a Zoom call with. So if you are interested in short fiction, particularly in the science fiction kind of zone, check out Short Story Club. It's shortstory.club is their website. And you can sign up for the newsletter to find out about new stories. And so, I read so widely this year, which was fantastic. I'm very much still a science fiction and fantasy person in my heart, but reading across genres has been really interesting, and it has inspired me to kind of read books that are described in ways that might not be my first choice, or the thing that I would incline towards even within the genres that I like, if that makes sense. So I have, historically, I have not particularly enjoyed or picked up alternate history or historical fiction kinds of books, but this year I read Mary Robinette Kowal, who writes historical fiction or historical fantasy, not historical fantasy, historical science fiction, and P. Lee Clark as well, and they've turned out to be two of my favorite authors that I've read this year in a kind of category of books that I have never really been gravitated towards previously. So I'm glad. I was hesitant to read books that were described as romance books. Romance books are not my my usual again. But I read A Taste of Honey by Kaya Shanti Wilson, which is described in the reviews as a romance, and it was beautiful. It was amazing. Such a beautiful novella. So expanding, in those ways was really good as well. And in particular after the Book Stack of Shame, because with the Book Stack of Shame I had a pile of 10 books already set, but ongoingly and always, but particularly after that, I did make a conscious goal to be reading diverse voices, and in particular reading diverse voices across all genres. So I've learned a lot this year, and I'm going to share some resources below, resources for race, equity, anti-racism, and inclusion from WeNeedDiverseBooks, as well as a post entitled Decolonize Your Reading Habits from AntiRacismDaily.com. And the post from AntiRacismDaily.com talks about the problem of so-called issue books, and the ways in which publishing as a field is predominantly white, and books by authors of color that get kind of classified as issue books, so books about pain and struggle and poverty, for example, get promoted in ways that books in other genres and other topics and other types of books by authors of color don't get promoted equally, right? So there's this problem of it's not that reading books, that are so-called issued books is a problem, but when those are the only time, that's when you're reading diversely is only when you're looking for a quote-unquote issue book, but when you're looking for a fun adventure book, it's always going to a white author, for example. That's a real problem. And that's a problem, I think, for readers, but also a problem in a kind of structural sense, like at the level of publishing and editing, right? So I would encourage reading those posts and checking out those resources for sure. They've certainly, I've learned from these posts, and they've been helpful for me. So I would recommend those, and always recommend reading diversely. So yeah, that's my reading for 2020. I'm really happy with the books that I've read. I feel like while I've read a ton this year, looking at the list of the books that I've read this year, there really weren't a whole lot of books that I didn't like that I read this year. There were certainly some, but, I was always looking forward to a book, and there was so many good ones. So really, really good reading year. Thank you, Book Stack of Shame. And so I want to finish with sharing my book stack of joy, which is what I'm starting 2021 with. No more book stack of shame. I'm actually starting the year again with as many unread books almost as I started 2020. But because I've enjoyed reading so much this year, it's because it's all I put on my holiday list was books. So my book stack of joy, no longer a book stack of shame, that I would love to share with you these 7 books on 2021's book stack of joy that I will be reading in 2021. I'm not saying that I won't buy any more books while I have this stack, because there's no shame in this stack. So the books that I chose, that I've picked up over the course of this year, but I haven't gotten to read yet. Most of these were holiday gifts, but I got a few of them earlier. 1, Water Magic in the Elements of Witchcraft series by Lilith Dorsey. And the description on the back describes this one as a deep dive into the history, lore, and practice of water magic. And so the Elements of Witchcraft series is going to be a new book series looking at elements in witchcraft, right? And so this one, of course, focuses on water, and I'm a Pisces. So, this one appealed to me immediately. So I'm looking forward to reading Water Magic. Also kind of related to water magic in its own way, I chose Undrowned, Black Feminist Lessons from Marine Mammals by Alexis Pauline Gumbs. And this is in the Emergent Strategy series on AK Press, which is an awesome small publisher and anarchist publisher. And the first sentence of the description for this book is, Undrowned is a book-length meditation for the human species based on the subversive and transformative lessons of marine mammals. So, folks will know that I love working with animal messages and learning about animals and so on, and also, reading a lot on feminism. So this book, just as soon as I saw the title of this book, and I will say I've read some of Alexis Pauline Gumbs' other work as well, but as soon as I saw this book, it was like, yes, this is going to be amazing. I'm really looking forward to this. The last nonfiction book that I got is called Becoming Animal: Unearthly Cosmology by David Abram, and I don't actually know a ton about this book, to be honest, but that David Abram has previously written The Spell of the Sensuous, and that it's a kind of environmental philosophy text, and it had titles of chapters that appealed to me as well, and talks about knowledge as bodily, which I also liked. So I'm curious about this one, and so that's on my list for 2021. The rest of the list is fiction, So I also have, this one was one that I bought myself. I have Worlds Seen in Passing, 10 Years of Tor.com short fiction. Tor.com is a publisher that I really like. They publish science fiction, fantasy, and horror as well. And they publish some amazing novellas and short stories. And so when I saw this one, it has the little dot of permanent marker, which means it was in the clearance bin really, really, really inexpensively. I saw this one and I picked it up right away because I did see that there are some stories in here that I've already read by authors that I really love, like N.K. Jemisin, and Kaya Shanti Wilson is in here. And I'm reading Max Gladstone right now. I've read Charlie Jane Anders. I've read Mary Robinette Kowal. I've read Ken Liu and Jeff Vandermeer, who's an amazing editor as well. So I really like books like this for finding new authors. So short stories are also great for bedtime reading, right? Because they're short. So that's on my list, 2021. I have, the rest are novels. I have Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. And this book is the first in what I think will be, a trilogy inspired by the civilizations of the pre-Columbian Americas and woven into a tale of celestial prophecies, political intrigue, and forbidden magic. And I read on a post by a book reviewer who I follow, who I seem to have quite similar tastes as, that this book also has bisexual representation in a main character, at least one main character. And so that is something that I look for. Looking forward to that. My sister gifted me the book The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. And this is the winner of a Pulitzer Prize. And Colson Whitehead has, I believe, won the Pulitzer Prize twice. I think that this was the first one. But I really enjoyed, I read by Colson Whitehead, The Intuitionist, earlier in the year, and I really liked that novel a lot. So this one, is about the Underground Railroad. But as the back of the book says, so I don't think it's a spoiler because it's on the back of the book, here the Underground Railroad is no mere metaphor. Engineers and conductors operate a secret network of actual tracks and tunnels beneath southern soil. And so it follows Cora, who is a young slave in Georgia, escaping on the Underground Railroad. So I'm really looking forward to reading this book as well. I really liked Colson Whitehead's, I think it was his first book, The Intuitionist. So I'm sure that this one will be excellent as well. And the last book on the book stack of joy I have is The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah Johnson. And Space Between Worlds, I'll just read the little blurb here. An outsider who can travel between worlds discovers a secret that threatens her new home and her fragile place in it, in a stunning sci-fi debut that is both cross-dimensional adventure and a powerful examination of identity, privilege, and belonging. And so this book, is the debut novel by Micaiah Johnson, and it deals with multiverse travel, so like alternate, being able to travel to alternate universes. But you can only travel in this book, and again, it's not really a spoiler because it's in the book, dust jacket, but one can only travel to alternate universes wherein one's double is not alive anymore. So this book follows one protagonist who is chosen to do this multiverse travel. And so I've kind of avoided reading too much more about this book because I didn't want to get any spoilers. But science fiction is what I love reading. So, every review I've read of this book has described this book as excellent. So I'm really looking forward to The Space Between Worlds. That is my book stack of joy 2021, and I'm so excited about it. This video has been longer than intended. I will timestamp it. If you've stuck with me, thank you. I am really curious what you have been reading all of 2020. If you've been reading 2020 a lot, it seems like with the weird year that it has been, that for some that has meant reading, a ton more than usual, and for some a ton less than usual. It's been a rough year. If you've read any standout books this year that you would like to tell me about, do tell me in the comments. And if you've read any of the books that I've read that you would like to share what you thought of, let me know in the comments. And of course, since I have the ever expanding TBR book stack of joy, if you have a book in mind that you think that I would love, that is not on my list of books I've read this year, do let me know, because I love a book recommendation. Thank you so much for watching. I wish you a happy new year. Bye.